Good morning and good afternoon. I'll be sharing with you some progress on CBSD resistance breeding work in Uganda. As an outline, I'll be sharing with you some trait hitabilities for CBSD traits, and then some highlights on studies on genetic gain, and then a CBSD pre-breeding strategy that we plan to adopt. First, the hitability estimates. So like you are aware, CBSD manifests itself on leaves and the roots. So based on the knowledge we have now come to terms that we must assess brown streak at 3 months, that's on foliar, and then at 6 months, still that's on foliar, and then at roots at harvest. So at 3 months, we look at two traits, that is the foliar severity and then the incidence. The same applies at 6 months, the foliar severity and then incidence, and also at 12 months when we look at root severity and then incidence. So we have, based on all datasets generated, tried to compute hitability estimates, plot based, of these traits. So we can see that at 3 months, hitability estimates for foliar ranges from 0.28 to 0.55. At 6 months, it ranges from 0.32 to 0.44, and at harvest, it ranges from 0.38 to 0.45. On the other hand, the incidence ranges from 0.47 to 0.56 for foliar at 3 months, and at 6 months, it ranges from 0.35 to 0.59, and at harvest, incidence ranges from 0.37 to 0.5. So this information is helpful, especially when incorporating into selection indices that normally inform on the selection. But you will notice that overall that hitabilities at 6 months and at 12 months are more informative, and so often we always in the indices factor in 6 and then 12 months traits in the selection indices. Here we're comparing cyclic improvement in brown streak disease, and for this comparison we look at 4 populations, C0, C1, C2 and C3, that were respectively constituted in those years. And also for this comparison we look at the SET trials, which are the seedling evaluation trials. We look at the CET trials, which are the clone evaluation trials, and then we look at the AYT trials, which are the advanced yield trials. Now for fair comparison, I've limited this to only datasets that are from Namlonge, where the SET trials are always conducted. So that means that I've pulled out data from cassava based on the SET trial, or the CET trial, and the AYT trial datasets for only Namlonge. And for this comparison, we looked at cassava brown streak disease severity, which is CBSD as on foliar, and we looked at cassava brown streak disease root severity, which is the CBSD RS. Now, this was only done at seedling evaluation stage, and at CET we look at cassava brown streak disease foliar severity, cassava brown streak incidence foliar, and then cassava brown streak disease root severity and cassava brown streak disease root incidence. So the same traits evaluated at seedling at the CET were the same traits evaluated at the AYT. So let's begin with this SET trials. You will notice that first of all, the number of individuals evaluated, you see that in the C0 population we had got 105 individuals evaluated at CET and 19 at AYT. In C1 we had got 4,874 evaluated at SET, 730 at CET and 63 at AYT. In C2 we had got 6,469 evaluated at SET, 326 at CET and 57 at AYT. And at C3 we had got 5,559 individuals evaluated at ACT, and right now we have got 617 individuals. So we are computing means from this, but what we have in parentheses are the standard deviations associated with these evaluations. What are the patterns? First, when you look at the seedling evaluation trial, you can for instance see that the mean cassava brown streak disease foliar severity in C1 was 1.21, in C2 reduced to 1.08, and in C3 it became to 1.01. Within limits, that indicates that almost a 16% reduction in susceptibility when you compare the C3 individuals with the C1 individuals. And it also indicates like a 40% reduction in susceptibility when you look at the root necrosis in C3 versus the root necrosis in C1. Though it's seedling, it still indicates progress in brown streak resistance breeding. Secondly, you'll notice that within a specific population, as you advance from one stage to the other, for instance, as you move from, if you look at the C0 population, as you move from the CET to AYT, so you can see here, for instance, that at CET folia we have got 2.34 as the mean severity, while I think it's better to compare with root severity. We had got 2.63 root severity at CET, and you can find that we have 1.16 at AYT. When you look at C1 population, you also see, for instance, you have got 59% incidence at folia, and you have got 49% incidence at AYT. So meaning that as we advance, that was very consistent. As you advance from one stage to the other, you get lower susceptibility. The exception was with the C2 population, where, for instance, as you shift from the CET to the AYT, we observed higher susceptibility. For instance, the mean root incidence in CET was around 24.8, while the mean root incidence in AYT was 38, meaning that there's an increase in susceptibility. So while we did not monitor the virus strains here, which could have either increased the titer load and consequently symptom expression, it's a major lesson to learn from that as we undertake these evaluations, especially in hotspots. It's also worthwhile to monitor disease progress. But overall, we see that there is a gradual increase in resistance with population improvements. So secondly, I also want to share with you some more detailed genetic studies that it's a summary of this paper published in Frontiers. So for this paper we assembled 32 clones representing the following categories as either land races that were cultivated in the 1940s. Then we have got released varieties that were released in 1993, those released in 1999, those released in 2003, those released in 2011, 2015, and then some of these candidate clones. So these clones were grown in 3 locations, and then assessments done. And for these assessments we use both linear and quadratic regressions to estimate gain. And ideally what we did here was that traits were regressed against the order of release. So I'm just going to share with you highlights on brown streak. So for the brown streak, you see the following: that on folia there was almost 2.3% increase for brown streak when you look at data from 2003 to 2019. We only computed clones. We used for this comparison that was stretching the period between 2003 and 2019. Now For root necrosis, you see that there was 1.4% increase, an increase in resistance. So, meaning that we have made some gains for brown streak resistance at both foliar and at root necrosis, but more gains have been made at foliar. Out of curiosity, we also try to share with you some of these yield traits. So you'll see here that we don't have any appreciable gain in yield traits, both fresh root yield and harvest index. So meaning that as we selected for brown streak, we had a penalty for yield. It's this that we are trying to sort out, so that we don't have more penalties for the fresh root yield. So when you put all this together, we can see the following milestones. When in the period 2004 to 2011, 2004 indicates the time when brown streak came in. The major focus were on resistance screening, germplasm from within Uganda and from the region, and also trying to work on protocols for evaluation, the best time to measure, and also trying to make some hybridizations. Now in 2012 to date, again, resistance screening remained a major activity. Now we had more structured cyclic population improvement, and of course the selection tools, especially genomic selection, and then the phenotyping methods, where ELISA methods were also being developed. Now, and various data methods. Now in 2020 and beyond, of course, cyclic population improvement will increase, and of course some novel technologies that have been proved elsewhere could be adopted, but also having a strategy of CBSD breeding that is informed by new knowledge and maybe new tools which when combined together will help us to sustainably breed for brown streak resistance. So here we want to highlight on the breeding strategy. So for this breeding strategy, it has got two main assumptions. One, we have got elite parents which are in the cyclic population improvement, and these elite parents are deficient, for instance, in case of brown streak resistance. They don't have the appreciable level of resistance to brown streak. Then secondly, second assumption is that we have got some donor parents, and that these donor parents have got appreciable levels of brown streak resistance. So here ideally we're trying to exploit what's available in the donor parent such that it can be utilized in the elite parents. But to do this, it's best to go through bridging, such that you don't disrupt any genetic gains that are already in the elite parents. So this bridging process, which we are saying we need to have bridging parents, is that we identify any outstanding clone that has come from donor parents that has been identified through root cross methods, and it has proven to have CBSD resistance. So this donor parent is crossed to an elite parent. The elite parent, of course, is already adapted. So, and then once this is crossed, then the resultant progenies are evaluated to check and see whether the haplotypes of brown streak resistance are available, and of course there's selection that can be done, and you may cross again. So it's the bridging process here where we have to answer the following questions. How many elite progenitors can we use for crossing? How many donor parents can be used for crossing? How many cross combinations? How many progenies per cross? And also how many number of cycles that we can use. And of course, once these answers are sorted, then it qualifies those individuals to go for crossing into the mainstream cyclic population improvement, where I think we have some good understanding on how many progenitors we can use, and then how many cross combinations, and then progenies. So in a nutshell, is that for this breeding strategy we are shifting from donor parents, going through bridging, and then making them to go through the cyclic population improvement. think that for the donor parents, we assume we can get this resistance from either wild relatives, elite clones, or land races. So new knowledge and phenotyping methods will significantly enhance this process. And also, one other final thing to note is that the selection criteria here in the breeding process should use the same index that is used in the selection criteria here in the elite.